There is some division. I mean, many of us are looking at this feeling like it is an act of intimidation, that this is another example of the president trying to expand his executive authority, trying to intimidate the governor and others in the state, as well as, of course, the protesters trying to demonstrate his strength. But the other, the interesting thing is that this is also a president who is operating on a technicality, but he is operating within the rule of law.
Let's look at another issue that's going on in America. Another day of political sparring, it seems, between the president, Donald Trump, and the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. The president's been doubling down on his decision to deploy more National Guard troops and Marines to Los Angeles. For days, of course, there have been protests against immigration raids by officers from ICE. That's the Immigration Customs Enforcement Unit. Donald Trump says LA would be burning to the ground if he hadn't sent troops to respond. And he described some of those involved in the protests as insurrectionists.
But I can tell you last night was terrible. The night before that was terrible. We have, as you've seen, it was on most of your networks, people with big, heavy hammers pounding the concrete and pounding curbs, pounding it, breaking up all, and handing these big chunks of concrete to people. And they were taking that concrete, going up on bridges and dropping it into the roof of a car. They were throwing it at our police. They were throwing it at our soldiers that are there. And we got it stopped, and we have them in custody right now. Look, I could tell you there were certain areas of Los Angeles last night, you could have called it an insurrection. It was terrible. But these are paid insurrectionists. These are paid troublemakers. They get money. And when you take a look at what they do, where they show up and everyone's saying, what's he doing? He's pounding the curbs. This one guy's pounding the curb, breaking the curb, and handing big pieces of granite. In some cases, it's granite and concrete to other people.
And Mr. President, when is the last time you spoke with Governor Newsom?
A day ago. Called him up to tell him, got to do a better job. He's doing a bad job, causing a lot of death and a lot of potential death. If we didn't send out the National Guard, and last night we gave him a little additional help, you would have, Los Angeles would be burning right now. Los Angeles would be not a lot different than what you saw take place in California and Los Angeles just a little while ago. And, you got to remember, we have the Olympics coming. And we don't want people looking at Los Angeles like it would have been. It would have been bad. Last night, they had total control. If we didn't have the military in there, the National Guard, and then we also sent in some Marines, we had some bad people to look at.
Will the National Guard be in California indefinitely? How long will they be there until you think?
Until there's no danger. It's easy. Look, it's common sense. You ask me that question. When there's no danger, they'll leave. You would have had a horrible situation had I not sent them in. Horrible. You'd be reporting on a lot of death and a lot of destruction that's not going to take place. I think if you look, every night it got less and less. They were met with very strong force, the bad people, the bad, sick people that do what they do. But these are paid people in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases. And they really are, they're agitators. They were throwing iced water in bottles, in glass bottles, at officers and at soldiers. These are, you could not use the word insurrection, but you could also use the word, these are very dangerous people. They're bad people.
And tonight it seemed the unrest could spread to other cities across the US, with protests planned in New York, Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta and elsewhere. Now, California officials say that they weren't notified of that decision to send in troops. And this evening, the state governor, Gavin Newsom, has filed an emergency motion in federal court over the deployment of Marines and National Guard officers. The motion asks that the court block any expansion of the military presence in LA. Donald Trump is behaving like a tyrant, not a president, says Governor Newsom. The Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, has been holding a news conference saying the immigration raids had caused fear and uncertainty in LA families, and Donald Trump had usurped the authority of the state government.
People have asked me, what are the Marines going to do when they get here? That's a good question. I have no idea. The National Guard that are here now have one assignment, and that is to protect one building, which is the federal building downtown. The second building, which is the federal building on Westwood Boulevard. And as far as I know, nothing has happened in Westwood at all. So this was not needed. The idea that the administration would usurp the authority of our state government, take it away from our governor, Gavin Newsom. The governor knows that if we put a request in for the National Guard and it went to him, he would comply. There was never an issue there because we were never thinking about calling upon the National Guard.
Donald Trump, it seems, though, is not deterred from threatening to forcibly put down protests. In fact, he said he would do just that if protesters spoil a military parade that he's got planned for this Saturday. It's coinciding with the 250th anniversary of the founding of the US Army. Also happens to be his birthday on Saturday. He's 79. We're joined now by Dr Leslie Vinjamuri, the director of the US and Americas program at Chatham House. Good evening to you, Leslie.
Good evening to you, Carolyn.
You're listening, of course, here to the huge war of words between the Californian governor, Gavin Newsom, and Donald Trump. Who do you think the American people on the whole are backing?
Well, it is a divided population, as we know, polarized on issues of crime, of stability. This has a short and also a long history. So I think there is some division. I mean, many of us are looking at this feeling like it is an act of intimidation, that this is another example of the president trying to expand his executive authority, trying to intimidate the governor and others in the state, as well as, of course, the protesters trying to demonstrate his strength. But the other, the interesting thing is that this is also a president who is operating on a technicality, but he is operating within the rule of law. He is not willing at this stage, he's not trying at this stage to go beyond what can be justified in legal terms, which is why the reference to this one, to protecting federal buildings, which he has the legitimate authority to do. And this is also why, of course, the court has not allowed the case to go forward that was filed to block these troops coming. But it is, it's a battle. It's also a distraction, let's be honest. There's been a lot of headlines around Elon Musk and Donald Trump and many other things.
Yes.
And this has really galvanized, that not only sending the troops in, but obviously sending ICE in, which is really what's at the root of this, doubling down on the anti-immigration agenda, which is very popular, especially with his base, but people across the country have been concerned about immigration.
And Gavin Newsom himself now hopes someday of being a candidate for president, perhaps. I wonder how helpful this row is for him in that ambition, because he has in the past faced a bit of criticism for almost cozying up to Donald Trump, hasn't he?
Sure. I mean, it's a long ways out from having presidential candidates. It's an even longer ways out when the president is Donald Trump, and the pace and intensity of politics in the United States is so extreme as it is. Anything can happen. I suspect within his own state that this very much plays in his favor. But when you start to look, if you go back to our memory of the George Floyd protests, the brutal killing of George Floyd and the protests that it inspired across the country, people were very, very divided on this, and it became a central issue in the election, not the only issue in 2020. So it's very difficult to anticipate how it plays out, but it doesn't play only to one side of the aisle. That I think is certainly the case.
Okay, well, I don't know whether you'll be celebrating Donald Trump's birthday. This parade on his birthday day is estimated to cost about $45 million. I wonder how he's selling this to the American people. He gave us a kind of answer during a press conference at Fort Bragg earlier.
Recently other countries celebrated the victory of World War I. France was celebrating, really. They were all celebrating. The only one that doesn't celebrate is the USA, and we're the ones that won the war. Without us, you'd all be speaking German right now. Maybe a little Japanese thrown in. But we won the war.
Do you think that's convincing enough, especially after, of course, Elon Musk, the now departed Elon Musk, and his Doge department were charged with cutting unnecessary military spending? What do you think, Leslie?
I mean, I think some people will. This is another one of those acts, celebrations in this case, which will be polarizing. People that don't like Donald Trump will like him much less for this kind of extravagance, which is exactly how they'll see it. People that do like Donald Trump will greatly admire the patriotism and the kind of celebrating the nation, celebrating the country, and they won't see the it's also, as you know, in the United States, we're not there yet, but we're pushing up to July 4th. So there's sort of this notion of the man, the president, and America kind of all being one. And for his base, I think that's tremendously appealing. They won't really put a price tag on it.
Okay. Well, look, you are returning very soon to the United States, aren't you, after many years of living here in the UK? Oh, my goodness. Well, as you prepare to leave then, what is your assessment now of the state of UK-US relations?
Well, I would say it is perilous. I think it's being managed actually at the top table very, very well by Keir Starmer and his aides. I think they've managed a very difficult president who's come down extremely hard on Europe. But, I would say, Caroline, I mean, I've been here this time 19 years. I was here many years on and off before, and I will always have a footprint here. I have a family that is British. There have been many ups and downs in this relationship. Maybe the strongest up was on the back of a terrible tragedy, that 9/11. I was here that day and the days that followed, and the outpouring of support for America, for Americans, was really palpable on the streets of London. And, I was here during the global war on terror, and it was, trust me, as you well know, very, very different.
Yeah.
So we sometimes think, Trump is the worst of America, for those of us who don't appreciate that he's really taken a tough line on Europe and is sort of bucking all the things, that the morals, the values, the diplomacy, the things that we believe in. Even if he gets some things right, we don't like it. But there have been some other very dark moments between the US, between the UK. And, you sort of have to break it down, even when the leaders have been aligned, as they so often were in the aftermath of the invasion of Iraq. The public, how people felt about the United States, people in Britain, how they felt about the United States, especially as the news on torture and extraordinary rendition came out. That was a very, very dark moment. Remember the protests on the streets of Europe leading up to the invasion. So here we are again. It's not a terrific moment, but I do think that there is a really rich underpinning to this relationship. And this struggle, this fight, this moment is certainly only one data point in a very long relationship.
Well, thank you for outlining that for us and for your thoughts on the relationship after your years here in the UK. Leslie Vinjamuri.